What an incredibly historic day this is, right? This is amazing. And for many of us, it's a dream come true to be able to come to Jerusalem to speak about one of the things that's most passionate in our hearts. And that's the center of the universe, the center of the world, the temple. We're always short on time, so we're going to go ahead and jump into this. The spiritual, or windows and gates, is the first one. Let me go back.
So Rico Cortez and Joe Good, they can tell you all of the archaeological evidence. We're going to look at what the spiritual indicators are that the Holy Temple Mount is indeed the Temple Mount and not just a Roman fort area.
So Genesis 28, we see Yaakov's dream of the ladder. Now, although this is a stylized painting, more than likely it was like a ziggurat. Have you seen the ziggurats from the ancient times? That was more than likely what the vision that he saw. So we have the dream of Jacob's ladder, and it spanned between heaven and earth. So there was a gate there. There's a spiritual window that's open over this most holy place, and we know that that's where he poured the oil over the stone, and knowing it was a consecrated place on earth. This is a picture of the child of promise, Israel, being in the right place at the right time.
You also see the Melech, the messenger of Creator, coming and stopping the sacrifice of Isaac. There are certain places that are windows in heaven, portals, if you will, gateways, and these can be used. Many people have the misconception that a gateway is either good or else it's evil. But in fact, gateways are gateways. And the forces of darkness and the forces of light are constantly at war to be the gatekeepers of these portals. They all want the portals. They all want the windows. And so the question is, who is keeping the gate at these windows in heaven?
In native tradition, there's gates and portals everywhere. But this is the most important one. Because what happens at this gate, where the Temple Mount is, affects the whole world. So this is a picture of the Black Hills in South Dakota and Wyoming. The Black Hills is known as Pahasapa to the Lakota people, and they call it that because they call it the heart of the earth, or the heart that everything that is. So in the wake of the forced removals of the tribes, in 1851 the Treaty of Fort Laramie was signed, and the Black Hills were a portion of the land that was acknowledged in that treaty.
We're sharing this information with you not to dispute where the most important place is in the world, but to say that sacred places are given to certain people for the land that they're in, for the places that they're in, based on windows in heaven. And so to demonstrate that the forces vie over this, we're giving as an example first the Black Hills. And the Black Hills are considered to be sacred places. It's a place where the Lakota people go to seek Creator. They have vision quests there. There are ceremonies there. It's a consecrated land to the Lakota.
Until gold was found by the U.S. government. At that point, all the treaties were broken. They came in, took the land from the Lakota people and their most sacred site. There was a federal judge who reviewed the case, and he said, quote, "A more ripe and rank case of dishonorable dealing will never, in all probability, be found in our history."
Sacred site stolen.
So there was a major court battle that ended ruling for the Lakota people and saying, you know what, this site belongs to them, it's sacred. We owe them money for all the gold that was extracted from them. But you know that the Lakota are the poorest, one of the poorest tribes in the U.S., and although there's billions of dollars in Federal Reserve that they can at any moment take into their tribe, they will not do it because you cannot buy or sell a sacred place.
And they will not bow their knee to the God of gold. Isn't it interesting, though, that even though the judge ruled that what happened broke treaty and it was unconstitutional, it was wrong legally, they still refuse to give back the portal, the gateway. They will not let it go. They say, well, we'll give you money for it, but they won't give it back.
And here, the Temple Mount, by law, Jewish people should be able to pray at their most sacred holy site. But it's not enforced. And it's actually on the Prime Minister. It's the Prime Minister's call, whether that can happen or not. You know, and there is a spiritual authority that has been imposed over this sacred site. And like we mentioned earlier, you know, we're in Israel. This is your homeland. This is your indigenous land, and yet you can't pray at the most sacred and holy site that belongs to you. It belongs to you. And this is a travesty of justice, but we know it's going to change, and especially going to change when Mashiach comes. He's going to set all these things straight.
Maybe another example. In the Black Hills, there's another site that is commonly known today as Mount Rushmore. This is also a sacred site to the Lakota people. It was also, it was desecrated. How was it desecrated of all things? Carved images. Talk about a graven image going up in a sacred place. So here we see again, this is a place of sacredness to the Lakota people, and it's been desecrated. Another example.
Bear Lodge Butte is also a holy land within the Black Hills. It was renamed Devil's Tower, which is kind of interesting how things get named when conquerors come. Whenever we go throughout Indian country and we speak, we tell the people, yeah, people talk about Palestine this, Palestine that. But it was common practice by the Romans when they conquered an indigenous people to not only take their sacred places, desecrate them, but also even to change the names that they had over those places. You know, I mean, where does the word Jew come from? Judea. You know, that you cannot change this, but yet you've got the UN, and you've got all these resolutions, and you've got all these policies that are taking place that are trying to take what rightfully belongs to you, what has been written in stone in some cases for over 3,000 years, your inheritance to this land.
So Bear Lodge Butte got its name from the Lakotas, the Bear Lodge Butte, because there's a story about some girls who were running from the attack of some vicious bears, called out to Creator. Creator rescued them at that site. And so they named it Bear Lodge Butte. In 1906, President Roosevelt, during, of all times, the days of awe, he changed the name and set it up as the first national monument in the United States and named it Devil's Tower. Do you see how the renaming of a sacred site to turning it over to the kingdom of darkness is occurring? High place on the Black Hills, high place.
Which another point of high place, you know, this whole thing of, oh, well, the Beit HaMikdash was in the city of David. And people are buying into this. Many who've never, I've often asked people, have you ever even been to Israel? Have you been to the city of David? You know, do you see these verses that says that the ark went from the city of David up to the Temple Mount? You know, since when does the creator of the universe, the Almighty, place his most holy place at the bottom of a mountain? Right? What did the prophets and everybody, what did they do? They would destroy the altars that were on the high places. You know, so he's not going to take the low ground.
And when we try to give him what's second best, that's not enough, is it? He wants what he requires of us, and we should never compromise on that. Reconsecration of the land can occur once we have cleaned our hearts, once we have teshuvad, once we've turned from our wicked ways, once we have truly put upon the high place the throne of our hearts, once we've circumcised our hearts and said, my throne doesn't belong there, I'm just going to have one. No more levav, lev.
And this is the heart of the world, the Temple Mount, because this is where the temple is going to be built. This is where the prophets say that the Torah will go forth from Zion, right? The Devar, the word of the Lord. And there's going to be a cleansing that's going to happen before, because it has to be reconsecrated land. Even there's a lot of secularism that is taking place in the land here, but all this is going to be restored back to what it once was. So then it truly will become a house of all nations, where we can come and pray.
And what was it that the United Nations said in their warning statement? They said something about don't provoke. And what else did they say? Does anybody else remember? I don't remember. But let me tell you, we're not provoking. We are provoked. There is something unholy in a holy place, and that touches the very pupil of Creator's eye.